Welcome to Concepts in Chemistry. In this talk, we will discuss the International System of Units, called SI for short. So, the International System of Units, sometimes called the metric system, is the international standard for measuring things. Now, the SI base units are 7 in number and are defined by physical constants of nature. These physical constants include speed of light in vacuum, Planck's constant, Avogadro's constant, Boltzmann's constant, and others. So why do we have the SI system of units? Now, long time ago, people measured things using body parts. Because they used body parts, there wasn't consistency and people were misunderstood. So scientists wanted to be understood. So they decided to develop the SI system of units. So if a scientist writes a report using these units, somebody else, somewhere else, will be able to interpret these units and understand what they mean. So that is why the SI units are very important in science. So what are these units? Now, the SI units are 7 in number, and they include the following: length, mass, time, amount, temperature, electric current, luminous intensity. Now, as you can see, the 7 base units do have their corresponding symbols. And also they do have their corresponding units. And the corresponding units also have their corresponding symbols. And also some do have what we call the alternatives. Okay. So for instance, length has a symbol of lowercase l. And the unit of length is the meter. And the meter has a symbol lowercase m. And we have alternatives also. So the alternative of a meter is the centimeter or millimeter. Now, why do we have alternatives? We do have alternative because these alternatives allow us to measure smaller quantities of things, or smaller distances, or longer periods of time, or shorter periods of time. So that is why we have these alternatives. For instance, time is measured in what? It's in second in terms of the SI unit. Its SI unit is a second. But of course, we also measure time in minutes, hours, years, centuries, and so on. Okay, so yeah, but once you measure in alternative units, you can always convert back to the SI unit because there's always a relationship between them. Okay. Now let's look at what we call prefixes. Now, what is a prefix? Now, a prefix is a word, a number, or letter placed before another. Now, when a prefix is added to a unit name, it creates a larger or smaller unit by factors that are powers of 10. For example, if we add the prefix 1000 to grams, we will get 1000 grams. And 1000 means kilo. So, which means that 1000 grams is the same as saying 1 kilogram. So, prefixes define multiples of fractions of the base units. And these multiples of fractions always vary by factors that are powers of 10. Okay, so that is why it's always easier to interconvert between the SI units and the alternative units. Now, what are SI derived units? Now, these are units derived from various combinations of the 7 base units. So an example is density. If you want to find the density of an object or a liquid, you have to measure the mass of the object or liquid, and also you have to measure the volume of the object or liquid. So if you measure the volume of the liquid in milliliters and you measure the mass of it in grams, then that means that density would have units of what? Grams per milliliter, since you have to divide mass over volume to get density. Similarly, if we measure the mass of an object in grams and the volume of an object in cubic centimeters, then that means that the density of the object is going to be grams per cubic centimeter, okay, which of course is a derived unit. Okay. Now, there are several derived units in science. So as you study along, you'll find several derived units. Okay. But again, they are derived from various combinations of the 7 base units. Now, what are alternative units? These are units that allow us to measure small quantities of things or larger periods of time or shorter periods of time. Okay. So there are several of them, but here we just have a few. So an example is mass is measured in milligrams, and time also can be measured in years. Okay. So these are examples of alternative units.